30th of July, 1966, when England met West Germany in the World Cup final. Watching on from his home was Dave, accompanied by his wife, one-day-old baby, and dog. When England went on to win the match 4-2, not only were Dave and his wife pleased, but the baby also smiled, and even the dog barked at the TV and seemed to wag its tail with mildly increased vigour. On that day, Dave walked outside and noticed the birds were acting in a celebratory manner, singing a nice song he hadn't heard before. Furthermore, he noticed a rosebush flowering a beautiful new rose. And on that day, the grass seemed to have grown markedly taller than the day prior. It seemed to Dave almost as if all of nature was rejoicing in the victory. Though I have not been alive long enough to witness England win a World Cup title, I have nevertheless been waiting for the day to come once more. But at some point in my childhood, a certain conflict arose in me, and I asked myself a question. Why is it that I lend my support towards this particular collective of people? After all, there's really no reason other than them being born in a place that falls under the same arbitrarily defined geographical territory as me. They didn't earn it. I started to consider other factors that made me question my loyalties. Perhaps other teams had worked harder. Perhaps some of their players had been going through rough times lately and needed a lucky break. Perhaps another team had a better story. Perhaps I should cheer for a third world country because a victory for them would boost their economy by way of increased investments, tourism, and cultural exportation. So perhaps instead of supporting England, I should cheer for this more deserved country. Or maybe the entire tournament should be scrapped and this more deserved team should be declared the winners. Eventually though, rather than get involved in this headache, I remained an England supporter but would be happy for the winner regardless. But there remains a problem. In choosing to favour your country, is that not a kind of discrimination whereby undue favour is given to some collective of individuals for no reason other than them having the same nationality as yours? Or what is more commonly known as sports nationalism, something for which, well, almost everyone is guilty of, albeit to varying degrees. And psychological studies will tell us that we can identify heavily with our favourite sports teams. Hence why we get so invested in the outcomes and perceived narratives along the way. And so, in the name of upholding virtue, should a verdict not be placed on Dave and all sports fans? Should they be cancelled for carrying out the discriminative act of being a fan? What about Dave's baby and dog, as well as the birds, flowers and grass? Though we can't prove their guilt, perhaps they should also be cancelled, just to be safe. Given the current state of the world, it doesn't seem too far-fetched to imagine a future in which it becomes a popular belief that they should. And if the net is yet to be cast sufficiently wide, you don't have to look far to find similar, even worse troubles. When it comes to relationships, where's the level playing field? There are many factors which constitute a desirable partner, some of which are entirely genetically determined and can't be helped at all. And gender preference alone eliminates roughly half the candidates. Then there's height, body structure, facial features, age and ethnicity, skin, eye and hair colour, and any number of genetic factors that could affect their health, physical abilities, intelligence, and skills. Though there are a great many things that can be done to increase one's desirability, there's nothing fair or equal to be found here. Some people will have a vast pool of candidates to the point it becomes overbearingly troublesome, in which case there wouldn't be enough time in the world to give everyone a fair shot. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are those who may find themselves with little to no options and feel inclined to stick with the devil they know out of fear of being forever alone should they lose them. Should anyone who's ever had some kind of partner preference be cancelled? Within moments of first setting eyes upon someone, various things about them are being decided at an unconscious level. These processes are essential for our survival, but that doesn't mean they will always make a perfect assessment. If you are walking along a trail in the woods and suddenly happen upon a snake, immediately you may jump out the way in a startled manner without making the conscious decision to do so. The snake may have posed no threat at all, but you didn't take the time to think about the snake, your prior interactions with snakes, things you've read or heard about snakes. You simply jumped out the way. For the sake of a more socially relevant example, consider the scenario of a woman walking alone on a street late at night and a male stranger coincidentally walking in the same direction a short distance behind her. The moment she notices the man, she may feel he is a threat and will consider taking measures to ensure her safety. The less she has to do with the man, the far safer she will likely feel. And now consider the same two people, but instead the woman is at a party and she first encounters the man socializing with mutual friends. In the second context, he will be making a far more favorable first impression, and she may even desire to get to know him. Either way, the woman's judgment of the man has been compromised with bias. Any number of factors could influence the impression someone makes on you, such as how well put together they are, how they carry themselves, what they do for a living, or what mood you both happen to be in at the time. And people will even form a positive impression of someone based off just one favourable characteristic or trait. This is known as the halo effect, and explains why physically attractive people are seen as being more competent, trustworthy, socially skilled, intelligent, and virtuous. People, particularly women, who go from being overweight to within a healthy weight range will frequently report being treated more favorably after making the transformation. And people who are seen to possess intelligence and expertise in one field are often assumed to possess intelligence and expertise in other fields, regardless of whether or not they have actually demonstrated it. It's for reasons like this why some people might choose to adopt the opinions of their favourite celebrity. Oftentimes people will also treat others better if they think they can get something from them. And they will almost certainly treat others better if they fear they will lose something should they fail to please them. Then there is the highly pivotal factor of commonalities, tastes, and views. If you were to find out that someone listens to a different kind of music, reads different books, or watches different TV shows and films to you, you may think them to have poorer taste than you do, and as such conclude that they are less intelligent, less cultured, or less sophisticated. And when involved in exchanges over views, particularly religion or politics, it's incredibly common to find fair and equal treatment of the other party not too high up on the agenda. Many people will believe so strongly in views that they forget who they are and let their views claim a large stake in their identity. To question their view is to question their identity. To attack the view is to be perceived as an attack on the person themselves. Under such circumstances, rather than ascertain the stance of the other party and see the exchange as an opportunity to increase mutual understanding, they may instead respond with hostility and overall bad faith. The consequence of such unfruitful exchanges can lead to landslide prejudices, spanning extensive demographics to everyone who has the same view, similar views, or is in some way associated with the one who had the view that they don't like. That's not to blame any particular individual or group, as this phenomenon is widely observable. Some people will be seen more favourably and some less so, and sometimes the context can flip the script entirely. You're making unfair, inaccurate judgments of people all the time, and there are any number of relatively superficial factors that could influence that. Such are the limitations of mortality and having an incomplete dataset, and being human in general. Judgment, choice, and unconscious processes can cause prejudice, discrimination, and bias. And fundamentally, if equality is truly the goal, then at the very least, ego must be the sacrifice. You can't have equality in the world when the world has an ego, because people are inherently trying to make themselves seen in a more favourable light, not a more equal one. And the pursuit of personal validation creates a conflict of interest with the pursuit of total world equality. And the reality is, such a pursuit happens in today's world to a huge degree, dare I say, an unprecedented one. People might choose to subscribe to a cause because it comes with the benefit of bolstering their ego and social standing. Then there is the matter of attribution bias, the belief that when we ourselves do bad things, we are justified in doing them. But when others do them, it's because they are just bad people. But this should be of no surprise. People are more sympathetic to themselves than they are to others. Naturally, you're far more in touch with your own problems than the problems of others. Part of the maturation and relating process is realizing that other people have problems too, not just yourself. And this is why being perpetually consumed with self-sympathy can sometimes be a sign of immaturity and narcissism. And so typically after being sympathetic to one's own cause, people will broaden their domain of sympathy to anyone they consider to be their people, or what is more commonly referred to as in-group bias. That isn't to say that people don't care about the suffering that goes on across the world, but to say that a sense of care isn't equally distributed. It's for reasons like this that even if the world was magically in a state of total equality, the world would neither declare it or even know it because of implicit bias. For the sake of showing a more extreme but surprisingly common example of people being abundantly consumed in self-interest with negligent regard for others, look no further than to the biggest YouTube sensation, Mr. Beast. A Mr. Beast Twitter poll, that is, displayed on screen. This isn't exactly the most scientifically stringent poll, representing the audience of Mr. Beast and not the world entirely. There's trolling and dark senses of humour at play. But even still, you can read the comments to see people will feel justified in their choice of yes to this poll. And so it might make you a bit cynical as to just how concerned people are with being virtuous. This isn't all just to say that we should be disrespectful to each other and excuse everything, because ultimately we are going to discriminate anyway. And clearly, some forms of discrimination are worse than others. And it's not to say that a greater state of equality and even a better world as a whole can't be achieved, or that there aren't people out there who are sincere in their devotion to that objective. And certainly, that is a noble objective. But instead to show it's a curious thing where we draw the line between what's acceptable and what's not, but more so to show that people are not without fault and we don't make perfect assessments and treat people fairly all the time. It's easy to offload all responsibility, blame the world, and claim total innocence. But what takes courage and perhaps hurts the ego a little is to be introspective and consider shortcomings. So, journey through life and strive for better. There is yet much to learn and experience, so why the haste in passing judgment of others? Instead, withhold judgment, but remain curious, and you will increase your understanding of the world, thus enabling you to make better informed decisions. As such, prejudice and discrimination will naturally disappear. In order to do better as individuals, first we must identify areas that need improvement. To remind yourself that you are not finished is to remind yourself that the future holds possibility, and that's an exciting prospect. So, when the world is not in a perfect state, it should facilitate one in which a better state can be attained. One of forgiveness and understanding can make it so people are free to learn, develop, and journey through life. But the world is becoming increasingly against that. It demands a perfect state of morality now, because a body of individuals have supposedly attained to a state of moral perfection, claiming to be without fault and prejudice. Don't adhere to their decreed standard of perfection and you'll be deemed morally inferior, face their endless wrath, and be cancelled. As such, the world is descending ever further away from the landscape that can facilitate the journey of a seeker. It looks down on all those who are willing to admit their shortcomings and strive for growth. Such an individual is to become the focal point of animosity and told why they're wrong, bad, immoral, or ugly. And there's a certain irony in that, given we're supposed to be more sensitive and concerned with the mental health of others. This vicious environment will instead cause people to stand their ground, dig their heels in, and fight. In a less figurative sense, should any prejudice or shortcomings actually exist, the condemnatory approach to stopping it will only strengthen it instead and perpetuate an increasingly combative dynamic, leading to tribalism and a primitive bashing of heads to prove who's strongest. But the approach of anger is accessible before even the dawn of wisdom. So, to avoid damnation from the masses, seek not to journey, but instead, regardless of where you are, declare to the world that you've already arrived. The louder you scream it, the more people will believe it, and the more reverence you will have to lapse up. Quite the attractive deal. All you have to do is follow the simple orders given to you by this body of moral perfection, and you too can become a hero and never have to face their anger. It's no wonder it garnered popularity, and when an idea becomes popular, it gains social proof. No questions are asked, and the crowd is just assumed to be right. A great place to go for those who are clueless and in need of someone to follow who looks like they have all the answers. Young people in particular are of course looking for role models and a bold calling, and it also provides safe refuge for those who fear the angry mob turning on them. To take a look at other social justice movements, women's suffrage had a very clearly defined end goal of securing voting rights for women, and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was vivid in its depiction of a better tomorrow. Cancel culture, on the other hand, is incredibly abstract and ambiguous, taking issue haphazardly with whoever or whatever it pleases. So there are no intrinsic measures to stop it hurtling along and continuously gaining momentum in whatever direction it's headed. Countless examples throughout history will tell us that movements that aren't clearly defined generally fall to the lowest common denominator as the crowd grows, becoming increasingly powerful yet unforgiving and tyrannical. In this instance, its course is set for totalitarian dominion over what is considered moral. And ironically enough, that's when you can be totally assured equality is truly lost and freedom with it. If they are perfect and you are not, then surely they are deserved in shepherding you to the promised land by dictating your opinions and actions. It's for reasons like this that anyone claiming to represent the standard of moral perfection should be seriously questioned. Good intentions in places? Most certainly. Deserved in their morally exalted status? Most certainly not. But to what degree they are sincerely intending to uphold virtue, and to what degree they are ultimately serving themselves, I will leave that for you to come to your own estimations. To aim to treat people more equally is a good thing, but to claim to be totally free of prejudice is a rather fictitious thing to declare. This reality is not the prettiest thing, but it is the state of the world. So, from where did this exceptional image of morality arise? Well, the ideal of unrealistic perfection and desire to be seen as something you're not is certainly nothing new. Pharaohs of ancient Egypt were thought to be the living embodiment of the god Horus. Various Roman emperors, including Julius Caesar, were deified upon their death and had temples built to honor them. Japanese emperors claimed divine ancestry, and Chinese emperors' right to rule was regarded as being mandated by heaven. These depictions helped to reinforce the ruler's power and legitimacy. These days, you'd have a hard time convincing others that you're a deity. But there's no shortage of lies people try to sell each other. For as a society grows, so too do its means grow to cultivate a more sophisticated ego. Whatever image you want to create, earned or not, the internet and virtual world give you the tools to create it and convince others too, whether it's the most cultured, the highest moral and ethical standards, the most powerful and wealthy, or the most oppressed and impoverished, the most motivated, dedicated, and hard-working, the most masculine, or the most feminine, or the most in touch with both, the most saint-like, or the most rebellious. And there's serious pressure to be perceived as attaining to the desired standard, because you can't afford to look dumb when there's an abundance of information at your fingertips, and everyone claims to be so smart. So smart or not, you'd better forge an image of intelligence. For women in particular, you can't afford to have beauty imperfections or unique features when the flawless standard of beauty is staring you in the eyes every day online. So apply those filters, pinch that waist in, add some nice curves, and conform to the generic cultural standard of beauty. Can't afford to look bored or mediocre when others appear to be living extravagant, joyful lives. Can't afford to have your own thoughts, opinions, and ideas when that might get you cancelled. So drop all independent thoughts and adopt the most popular, socially validated belief. Can't afford to have the angry mob point the finger at you, so just join them instead and direct your outrage at others, because the best offense is a good offense. Can't afford to be anything less than doubtless in your conviction when the world mocks uncertainty and will deem you treacherous should you change your mind and grow. Can't afford to be imperfect when perfect idols are seemingly everywhere, better than you in every way. Can't afford to be you when the world tells you you isn't good enough. So dwell in the shadow of these New Age gods and stare yearningly at their magnificence. Compare yourself to their unattainable grandeur and let seeds of insecurity be sown within you. And as self-intolerance grows, so too will your new false image, until soon enough you can join them in their pseudo-deified state, continue the perpetuation of insecurity, and stand up nobly with them for a fake world. When the world tells you you're ugly, stupid, immoral, should we wonder why fake beauty, fake intelligence, and fake morality is so prominent? And when it tells you individuality, originality, and sincerity are wrong, should we wonder why dull replication has arisen? When the ceaseless underlying drone beneath the grandiose facade is really just an amplifying message of inadequacy, should we wonder why mental health outcries are surging and insecurity is everywhere? Pretending to be something you're not doesn't cure insecurity, it creates it. When identities are built on falsehoods, then self-esteem is low, and people with low self-esteem are more likely to direct their anger and frustration towards others when they feel threatened or their sense of self-worth is challenged. And when the sense of self-worth is built heavily on falsehood, then the risk of self-worth being challenged is huge. But this should come of no surprise when we stand for self-intolerance and obsess over perception, because reality just isn't glamorous enough to fit our inflated egos. Should we wonder why people are so troubled and angry as a consequence? Loathing the world and massive demographics can be symptomatic of self-rejection. And when you're insecure in your position in the world, you are more likely to not treat people well, but instead become the crab in the proverbial bucket, clawing them back down. And so, what we're left with is a messy concoction of anger and hatred towards others, where no matter who you are, or what your life situation is, one thing can be guaranteed. There's someone out there who thinks you're the problem. If one were to be so ridiculously bold as to consider an analogy that humanity could be thought of as one whole, with certain measures for combating disease, cancel culture can be compared to the acquisition of an autoimmune disorder. supposedly intending to cure disease, but mistakenly, or not always mistakenly, attacking the entire system itself. As such, the entire system suffers. Be seen in a bad light for a brief moment and you may be forever identified with that moment and become the target of cancellation and unending wrath. So you'd better make sure the image you build is watertight. Anyone can manifest an incredible image with the help of technology and manipulation, but how well would it hold up under total scrutiny? Who would want everything they've ever said, done, and thought revealed to the world? Who would come out unscathed? Where would their pristine image be then? Would they be leading the charge of cancel culture, or would its full force be headed in their direction? Even the most noble of individuals are not without flaws. Seek a reason to take issue with someone, and you will surely find it. So, should we cancel the world? What if we were to consider the idea that perhaps we should? If cancel culture is really here to stay, and no one is without faults, why not cut to the chase? Perhaps we are not all perfect and deserve it. Perhaps when declarations of being better than others fall on deaf ears, when no ideas or people are any longer worshipped as having attained to a state of perfection, when everyone has been finally cast out from this far too flatteringly lit masquerade, then fear and anxiety of being cast out will be lost. And once all are united under the umbrella of shame and embarrassment will also disappear. When true perfection is nowhere to be seen but shortcomings are everywhere, there will be no choice but to necessitate forgiveness and understanding once more. When people are no longer so vehemently consumed by ideas and insistent they are right, but are instead willing to admit that they don't have all the answers, then inquisitiveness and enthusiasm for growth can return, and we will naturally strive for better. Or in the almost cliché but relevant as ever words of Socrates, when one can see, the only thing I know is that I know nothing. Perhaps when the false is seen as false, we can liberate ourselves from it, and the journey to discover truth can begin. Perhaps in that sense, truth can set us free. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to see more on this, I've just launched a Patreon where I wrote a short cautionary tale of a divided society that comes in a written as well as an audio form. In the story, we explore many similar themes to those we've covered here, so if you like the video, I think you'll like the story too. So if you want to see that, click the link in the description and check it out. I'll also post some raw thought pieces there from time to time, and higher tier patrons will get a shout out at the end of the next video. Otherwise, be assured that all main content will remain on YouTube or freely available.